Hey everybody, this is David, MSOM 602, coming to you today from guess where? Abu Dhabi. I've been here a couple of days and we'll be spending the next 2-3 weeks or so in the Middle East. And I am here actually with my daughter who's doing some recruitment for graduate school. She is the director of graduate recruitment for the Lyle School of Engineering at Southern Methodist University in Dallas, Texas. And so she called me up and said, "Dad, you want to go to the Middle East with me and hang out?" And I said, "Absolutely. I'm always up for a trip." So welcome today from Abu Dhabi. What I wanted to do is recap the first lesson and preview the upcoming lesson. I do this, as I mentioned in the welcome video. I do this every week. And so I want to talk just a little bit about Lesson 1 that you just completed. Lesson 1 was really a foundational type of lesson. And that lesson started with an introduction. And I believe I mentioned in my welcome video the importance of those types of introductions. So I appreciate the thoroughness and the response and the ability to connect and communicate in Lesson 1 from the discussion boards that you had. The second discussion board in Lesson 1 was foundational as well, and it talked about your view of leadership. And as I mentioned again in the welcome exercise, I really wanted to provide you with some multiple looks at leadership. And the Drew Dudley video that you saw, Lollipop Moments, I thought was a really good one, because in that one he prescribes that really anyone can be a leader. Now, I don't necessarily know that he talks about, but many times what you'll find about me in the classes is I'll present you with information that I don't necessarily agree with, just to get you to think about different components. And so he had a lot of great things there. I mean, many times we think about leadership from a power perspective. I mean, who's in charge? And again, what he's saying is there are many different ways to take a look at this. And then the second video that you saw, I liked as well, because it talked about leadership without ego. And many times we think of leaders. I heard a saying one time that said, if somebody comes up to you and says they're a leader, chances are they're not, okay? And so we have to really be careful how we define leadership going forward. And I wanted to make sure that we provided that level of foundation for you as we began to think about leadership before we put that word servant in front of it. So hopefully those two discussion boards, both on the introduction and then your views of leadership, were very important. And then finally in Lesson 1, you took the return on character assessment. And again, I wanted to provide this for you so that it will give you a lens through which you view leadership and leadership topics. So don't get too shaken up on that if you thought you needed to be on one end of the spectrum versus the other. Assessments are by their very definition sometimes fallible. However, the key here is for you to be able to take an objective look at how you're going to view these topics going forward. Okay, so that was Lesson 1. Again, hopefully that provided a good introduction to the course. All right, Lesson 2. Let's do a preview of that. Lesson 2 begins to talk about in the discussion board. Sorry, I got something in my eye. In the discussion board, it talks about leadership in the workplace. We spend a significant amount of our time, many of us 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, in the workplace. And so how we view leadership and the different ways of servant leadership in the workplace are really key and really the principles and the foundation for Lesson 2. Now, the video that you're going to be looking at on this one is about lead without saying anything. And what you're going to be doing is seeing a very creative, I thought, look at how conductors can lead an orchestra without saying anything. And you'll look at their expressions, and the person who's leading this TED Talk, I thought, did a fantastic job of segmenting the different type of conductors and what they do. So again, try to draw some connection there and what the importance is for you as a leader or for other people as a leader. Sometimes you can lead by not saying a single word. And so I thought that was very creative. So that's discussion board. This week you're going to have a memo exercise. Now, for those of you that I talked with on the phone, I think I've talked with almost everyone, maybe a couple I have not. I explained a little bit about memo exercises. And I also have a memo exercise announcement in there. Now, memo exercises are simply this. They're not research papers. They are an opportunity for you to apply some of the learnings that you have. And so you're going to have a series of 3 memo exercises in Lesson 2, Lesson 4, and Lesson 5. And those memo exercises will build upon each other. And so the first memo exercise that you will do is you will be, I'm asking you to pretend that you're the leader of an organization or leader of a department that is moving to a servant leadership model. And the first thing that you need to do in any type of organizational change that you make is communicate what the change is. And so I'll tell you this, if you don't describe in this situation what servant leadership is, so what's the definition of servant leadership, and you communicate that to your people, if you don't do that for them, they're going to do it for you, and many times their definition will be different than yours. It's important that you make sure that you define those things. Now, write this in, don't use sources. Many times students will come in here and they'll use citations. I don't want you to do that. I want you to pretend that you're writing a memo, an inter-office memo to your team. And so do it in your language. Do it in a way that you will communicate with your team so that they clearly understand what servant leadership means to you. Now, again, in subsequent memo exercises, Lesson 4, Lesson 5, you're going to get into why you're moving to servant leadership. And then in Lesson 5, you're going to do, so what's in it for the different people. But you don't do that in this one. So don't go all the way and do all what, why, and so what. You only provide in this first memo exercise your definition of what servant leadership is. Now, you may refer at the end of your memo, your inter-office memo, to say, hey, there will be additional memos forthcoming, but don't get into that level of detail. Too often in this exercise, students will give way too much information. Also remember that this is not a time to be exhaustive, because you know as an employee that sometimes if things are too long, you only read about half of it. And so make sure that you're very judicious with your words in this one, okay? And so that is the memo exercise this week. And then the paper that you write, remember all papers need to have cover page, introduction section with a heading, body headings, a conclusion statements, and a reference page. And so make sure that you do that. So this week's application will talk about workplace diversity and servant leadership. How do you lead people in your organization who may be different? Because that will happen, okay? And so often today, we're looking for these homogenized workforces. We're looking for everyone to think exactly like us. And I think that's a recipe for disaster. And so the solution to that, in my mind, is to make sure that the leaders in that organization or the leaders in your departments know how to work with people who think differently, who act differently, who have different opinions, and can actually draw upon that diversity for the betterment of the organization and the group. Okay? So that's your reading exercise, that's your writing exercise, those are your discussions, your memo exercise, and your application for this week. And I really look forward to the comments that you're going to be making on those. All right? Well, have a good week. I've already talked to a couple of students on Skype this week, so I know that it works here from the Middle East. If you need me, make sure you bounce me an email and reach out and contact me. Do know that I'm 8 hours ahead of the East Coast, okay? So keep that in mind when you communicate and expect my response on those. But have a great week, study hard, and I will talk with you soon from the next stop, probably Dubai. All right? Talk to you soon.